Alright, so let's say in this particular case, I feel as though I can actually draw an artery with enough detail to make me happy. So what I will allow you guys to do is to use like an image search website like Google Images, and we'll see if we can find something that we can use. So I'll go ahead here and I'll type in artery. I'll take a look and then I'll hit images. Then through Google Images, I have seemingly infinite choice of artery pictures that I could use. Now what I want to make sure that we do, however, is use images that we have the right to use. So we're going to go over here to tools, we're going to select usage rights, and because we're using this kind of for within an educational setting and we're not going to be selling our animations, I'll go here for labeled for non-commercial reuse with modification, because that's what we're going to do. So now I may have slightly less images, but these are ones that legally I can use, and the artists have agreed to let us use these images as well. Alright, so I can scroll through here, and let's say we select this image here, or at least part of this image as one that I want to use. What I will do is I'll copy this entire image, and you can use like a screen clipping type program or whatever you like, and I'll put this back into PowerPoint and paste it in. Now what I can do is I can crop out parts of this that I don't want. In this case, I'm going to left click, I'll go crop. I'm only interested kind of in this bottom image here. And I'll crop out these extra parts of the image. And what I can also do is I can kind of position it the way that I want it to as well. So if I want to rotate it or something, I can do that as well. Or make it bigger. Alright, so we're supposed to be animating laminar flow, which is basically blood flow through the vessels here. So I could go to Google Images again and grab a really nice image of a red blood cell and make a bunch of copies of them and just use that. But let's say in this particular case, I will try to actually kind of make it myself. So in this case, you may be tempted to go to the Draw tab. This is probably not what I'm going to use. These are more for like writing something with a pen, like text. In this particular case, I'll go to Insert, and then I'll go to shapes. And the reason why I go to shapes is I can give any kind of shape a colored fill, which is what I would want to do. So I'm going to make a red blood cell here. So I'm going to want to go for one of these shapes. I've got an oval shape here. And the default color for this one appears to be, looks like it's blue. So what I'll do is I'll go over here, then I'll go back over here to drawing format. And then what I can do is I can change what the shape fill is. So I want to make this something a lot more reddish. And I can change the outline here. In this case, I'll make it a little bit darker red and also a little bit thicker by changing the weight. Alright, I can now make this more a size that I'm interested in as well by dragging it around. And now here's my very first red blood cell that I can move around and rotate and put wherever I want. Now what I'll also think about doing is now making an awful lot of copies of this as well. So take a look. What I'll do is I can easily make a ton of copies of this. Now, what I want to actually do before I make copies is figure out how I'm going to be animating this. And then the interesting thing is when I make a copy of something in PowerPoint, if I've already given this object a whole bunch of animation or other like movements, it will copy all those movements again, so I don't have to keep on adding an animation to each object. So let's figure out how I'm going to animate this individual red blood cell. So another one of the tools we are going to use here, we're going to decide whether we want it to fade in or out. In this particular case, let's say sure, let's fade it out, fade it in when we first go to the slide. Another thing we're going to do is we're now going to add an animation. So I'm going to go animations, and I'm not going to change it to something else. I'm going to go to add animations. So that means it'll do one animation and then it will do the next one. So I'll go add animation and I want it to move. Now you'll notice here there's things like entrance effects. If I scroll down, I can see these things called motion paths. That's what I'm particularly interested in. What I want to be able to do is do a custom motion path. So I'm going to hit custom motion path, and then my cursor changes into this little like kind of crosshair type thing. So let's say I want to have this red blood cell start here, kind of go along the top, and then eventually go exit in this little part of the blood vessel over here. So I will do that. I will start drawing, and you'll notice it leaves a trail behind it that's quite faint. And then I'll let go when I'm happy where the destination is, and then I'll double click to close it off. And it plays how that red blood cell is going to move. And you notice now when I look at my animation pane, this is showing me all of the different animations that are going to happen. So first it's going to be picture 2, then at the same time I'm going to have this oval fade in, and then also that oval is going to start to move. I can also do things like change the amount of time that oval takes to move. So what I can do is, on this animation, I can right click on it, and then I can go over here where it says Effect Options. Now I have more options to control how long that animation will take to happen. Let's say in this particular case, I want it to be, in this case it says 2 seconds. I have some choices, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0, and also if I wanted to, I could go ahead and type in a custom amount of seconds here if I wanted to, but let's just keep this the default right now, 2. Now to show you what I meant by this is, and it repeats again when you do it, what I can do is I can go to this one oval that I have here. I'm going to click off everything, then I'll go to that oval. I can hit Control C on my keyboard, or alternatively I could go over here to Home. I could go Copy, or look, if I go down here I've got Duplicate. So I could go Control C, Control V, which is what a lot of you guys are going to be familiar with, or I can go Control D, and that will make a complete duplicate of that red blood cell. So if I take a look here, I've got it selected, and you notice here, the more duplicates I make, in this case I've made a couple, over here on the side on the animation pane, you can see each one of those has all the same animations duplicated of the parent. So what I can do over here is I can go Play Selected, and the way this particular animation is set is that they will all go after the other, and that's an important thing to understand how the animations in PowerPoints go. So they will default to being an animation will play, and then the next animation will play, because if you see what it says here, start on click. So what I can do is I can have it so that I'll select them all here, I'll go to the little drop down here, and I will say start with previous. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what this looks like. I'll hit play all. Now they all move at once. Now that doesn't look particularly convincing, does it? So what we may want to do is change some of the timings of our animations to make it look a little bit more natural. Alright, so at this point, by the way I have this animation set up, is that I can set it to play and my red blood cells will in fact move. But the idea here is that I want to have an animation where it looks like it's actually kind of like flowing blood, right? So I want to see my red blood cells move across into the vein, and I want to see a lot of red blood cells continually coming. I don't want to have to go and individually add in another whole row or series of rows behind these red blood cells here. So what I'm going to use is a tool that actually many professional animation packages will use, and it's the concept of looping in animation. So I already have one kind of animation behavior set, and I want to repeat it now essentially infinitely. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select one of these red blood cells, and you'll notice when I select them, both of its animation that I have set to it essentially are highlighted here. Now I'm only interested in looping the motion path. I don't want to loop in that fade every single time. It won't look very good. So I'll look at just the motion path. I'll go here, I can right click, or I can go to the menu here and I can go timing, and then there's two things I want to change here under timing. One is that we're going to rewind when it's done playing, and then notice here we have a tab here that says repeat. Right now it says to none, that's the default. We'll go down here and change it until it says until the end of the slide. So what this means is, as long as the slide is physically on, it'll continually be replaying this animation here. So what this looks like, to really see this, you have to see it by hitting slideshow. So I'll go from current slide, and if all goes right, this one individual red blood cell should continue to animate, and that's what it's doing. Alright, here we have our red blood cells, and we figured out how to make them loop when they are moving. Now I want them to move to kind of different locations. So what I could do is I can select one red blood cell if I want, and notice I get two things. One thing up here is to rotate, and you can see I can kind of make it spin so it has a slightly different orientation to the way it did before, and that looks a little bit more unique. And also down here I have this little movement tab, and when I go ahead and move this red blood cell, I don't just move the red blood cell, I will also end up moving the motion path along with it. So when I hit play, I can see, yes, that is totally moving along a different motion path. I may not be totally happy where it is. I may want to move it someplace a little bit different. I can always make those adjustments later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and move all of these red blood cells right now, just kind of essentially off camera, so you can get an idea of where I would want them to go. By now you can see by the way these trails are that I've either redrawn or I've moved all of these red blood cells, so they do in fact kind of have like a different start and end point, so things start to look a little bit different. So if I play it, actually what I'll do is I will play all of them. Sorry about that. That happens sometimes. I'll select all of these. And then there we are. We can see they all seem to move to the correct area. So now what I'm going to do is I'm also going to go ahead and manually make sure that I set each one of these timings on just the motion path so that it will in fact both rewind and then repeat and basically so it has that looping kind of animation that I want. And notice when I do make that change, I can see it visually, it makes a change and it says that it will in fact repeat it until the end of the slide compared to the other ones. Alright, here I've added that looping effect. So when I go ahead and I push play, I can see all the blood does in fact kind of move and it goes to where I want it to be, and it will in fact loop. Now I'm still not really 100% happy with this because I can tell that blood seems to move essentially in one big clump, right? And that's not what I want, and that's not how blood naturally moves. I need to make it look as though there are a bunch of cells each coming from one another. And part of the reason why these all look like they're all moving at exactly the same time is that they all move at the same speed and they all have the same start and end time. So the way that I can change that is, again, I can go and look at these motion paths and I can start to play around with some of the settings that I see inside of timings. So we are used to having things be set as a 2-second duration, right? I can change this to any number of seconds here. So either they're very fast, anything from 0.5 all the way to 5, and I can also enter in manual values if I wanted to. Let's say I wasn't happy with that, I could have that be 7 or something like that. I can do that. I could also have a delay if I wanted to. Another thing I may want to do is change what the smooth start and smooth end is. So if I get rid of this and I set this down to 0, this will essentially make it so that it has a constant speed. It perhaps looks a little bit natural. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and move, and you can see how much slower that one will in fact move. I'll go and change for all of these and we'll see what effect it has. Alright, so by this point I've rotated a couple of these cells just so they look a little bit more natural. I've made sure that I've had all these to have slightly different timings, and my motion paths I've also tweaked a little bit to kind of clean them up. So to see my final product here, I'll go slideshow from current slide, and now I in fact, once I hit enter, I see I do get something that looks a little bit more natural, with some of them moving faster and some of them moving slower. So to review all the stuff that we've essentially done, we've gone through and we've talked about how we can give some objects an initial type of animation. So we'll go to animation, we added a fade, then we added the animation of a motion path, then we tweaked that motion path so that they'd all move to different locations. Now there's some other questions that we have to think about. So for instance, what's going to be worth animating when we do a project like this, and what's going to be worth labeling and or perhaps adding annotations to. These are all things that we have to consider when we're doing this project. Just as one final last step, we'll be saving our PowerPoint and then embedding that original PowerPoint back into the OneNote for me to mark. And more importantly, what we'll do is we don't want to keep this in PowerPoint format. We do want it to be a video that we will upload to YouTube. So we can do this again. So we're going to go File. Instead of going Save, you're going to go to Export. And you'll see one of your choices is Create a Video. So go ahead and choose the highest quality, which is essentially 1080p here. And if you've recorded, let's say, auditory narrations, you may want to include them here. Then we hit Create Video. And then that video will be recorded in MP4 format, which you can then upload to YouTube. And again, you're going to be also embedding that YouTube video where I've essentially said in the OneNote as well. If you have any questions, send me an email.